I finished my last Cassandra Clare book. And that is The Lost Book of the White by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. If I'm pronouncing that name wrong, I apologize. I also disclaimer this video with I am going to mispronounce so many words in this video that just allow, okay? Because they go to China, they go to Shanghai, and they tap into the Chinese mythology, and so there's a lot of different Chinese words. I think most of them are Mandarin and not Cantonese, but don't hold me to that because I really don't know. So disclaimer. My other disclaimer is I don't know how accurate any of this mythology is to Chinese culture. Please let me know if it is accurate. I am very curious. I hope that it is, and that the customs and stuff they bring up here is true, and that the history they bring up is true. I really, really hope it is, but I don't know. I'm a Wazungo. I know nothing. Okay, so this is the second book in the Eldest Curses series. This is the most recently released one, and if you get a first edition copy, you get the matching cover to go with the first one, because they've changed the covers halfway through the series, like they do. And to be honest, I prefer the new cover, but it doesn't match my old cover, and I can't get the old cover in the hardback, so I'm a little bit annoyed. But I've ordered a special edition from Waterstones. It's not the exclusive one. I've ordered that one as well, but from a different website. And so one of them I will bend the cover back so that it fits properly, and the other one will stay like this, because I am extremely paranoid and I'm convinced I'm not going to do it well. So, anyways, this is the second book in the Eldest Curses series. This is set 4 months after the end of Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy, so it's before Lady Midnight. So there is one thing that I'm going to just warn you about that I suffered from when I read this book. The story is really good, but when the characters get into danger, it's a bit hard to get concerned or worried, because you know they're okay, because you've seen them in Lady Midnight. So I did suffer a bit from that, and I got a bit tired with the bad guys threatening their lives, because I was just like, really? That's what we're doing, really? Okay. So I will warn you, you may suffer from that. I did a bit, but the actual story itself is really good, and I love the character dynamics brought up in it. Like, it focuses a lot on the friendship between Magnus and Ragnar, and then later on it'll add Katrina to the friendship, and it's so lovely to see in this story, because we never see it. Yeah. So, basically, in this book, two people, old acquaintances, break in and attack Magnus, and they steal the Lost Book of the White, hence the title, and they've got to go and reclaim the book, because this is a very powerful magical book. I question why we don't burn these books, but okay, so let's get in. So, from this point on, spoilers, all of the spoilers. Sorry, gotta get to the right page. Here we go. So, it turns out in the prologue, we discovered that Ragnar faked his death in City of Glass because Samael, one of the greater demons, and he's considered like the second of all the greater demons, like second most powerful, he's the lover of Lilith, the snake of the Garden of Eden. And if you're wondering who the most powerful greater demon is, one guess. Come on, it's the one everyone knows. Lucifer. And so Samael's coming back, and Ragnar is an expert on dimensional magic, so Ragnar felt he had to go into hiding. And Magnus helped, so Magnus has known that Ragnar's been alive this whole time, and you didn't tell Raphael and Kat? Come on, Magnus! Okay, and then the prologue ends, and then Ragnar and Shinyon break in, and they steal the Lost Book of the White, and threaten baby Max, and stabbed Magnus with this magical Steph's thorn dagger thing. I don't know how to pronounce that either. It's Norse, that one though, not Chinese. Yeah, and they threatened Max, and I was like, And apparently Ragnar is under Samel's control, and I'm like, oh no. No, please no. But I will say this, Malik is still very much in love. Before that whole disaster, it was a very cute scene when Alec comes in through the window and, like, kisses Magnus, and then it's about to go further, but he's like, no, I just got off fighting demons, I need to have a shower. And Magnus is like, I'll wait here so we don't wake up the little one. And then, so they realize they have to go after Ragnar and get the Lost Book of the White back, so this time, Alec calls in the gang for backup. So we get Clary, Izzy, Jace, and Simon. And we see that Simon is still struggling with George's death. And I'm like, aren't we all? Aren't we all struggling with George's death? Cassie, what? And Magnus's emotions at the moment worry me. Because, like, Kat couldn't heal him of the cut from the magical thorn dagger. And then it turns out Clary had a very worrying dream of Magnus on a golden throne with like an X-shaped cut thing on his chest and chains. And he was very big and monstrous. And I'm like, well, that's lovely. And so they decide Maurice will watch Max, and Kadir, who's this gentleman that we've heard of, but we didn't really meet, I don't feel, until this story, who's going to help. And we see a brief glimpse of a projection of Maya, and I'm like, good to see you, darling, good to see you. Always good to see Maya. And yeah, the cold piece sucks, but what else can we do? And so Magnus tries to open a portal to Shanghai, and beetle demons start coming out, and you're like, the heck? So then Clary opens up a portal instead, and they get to Shanghai, but in different locations. So Magnus is separated from the rest of them, and they all fall from the sky to the ground, and you're just like, what is going on with the portals? And Magnus was dumped in a river, and the others were in a shopping mall in Shanghai. And so Magnus goes like, I'll meet you in front of the McDonald's. And Izzy's like, of course, there's a McDonald's here. And so they track Ragnar to an apartment, but Ragnar isn't there, but a Fae, Mr. Rumnus is, and I just want to say that is so close to Mr. Tumnus. So close. And snake demons attack, because another portal opens. They didn't open it, a different person opened it. And Magnus suffers from a debilitating headache, so he's not much use in the fight. And there's a giant face in the portal. And Mr. Rumnus flees because Magnus is furious that Mr. Rumnus lied to them. Like I said, he's not, his emotions aren't reacting as normal. He seems to be getting angrier quicker. And side note, Malik is really cute / sweet. Like, they call each other my love. And when Alec reunites with Magnus after they get separated from the portal travel, there's a rather intense kiss. And so apparently, because of the cut, Magnus is now seeing aura. And Magnus wonders if becoming a shadow hunter was the best thing for Simon, because he's been through so much that Magnus is wondering if becoming a shadow hunter was like the tip to break the camel's back. And then they go to a lovely hotel, and there's a bit of a sexy time for Malik, but it's not too detailed, which I appreciate. Thank you, Cassie. And then so Shin-Yun stabbed Magnus again, because the Shadow Hunters leave to go to the Institute, and Alec leaves Magnus resting because he's exhausted. And so when Magnus eventually decides to go to the Institute, Shin-Yun turns up again and stabs him. And apparently, if he doesn't get stabbed a third time and let Samuel become his master, he'll die. And I'm like, really? Can we get more creative bad guys? Really? The death. Always the death threats. I mean, no, the mind control isn't new, because that's what happened to Jace. So, I'm like, can we get more creative? Then, the Shanghai Institute sounds beautiful, and we meet the Shadowhunter who seems lovely called Tian, and apparently he's related to Gem, and he uses a rope string weapon, and Tian, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm sorry. I'm not Chinese. And apparently portals are a universal problem, and so the Conclave in Shanghai is trying really hard to figure it out. And then Shunyun attacks while they're at the Institute, and Magnus can now fly. I'm like, what? And then Bai Jingjing, another greater demon's daughters, were part of the attack, which concerns people, because they've been attacked in like over 100 years. Magnus is not doing well. He's not doing well. My baby needs to rest. And then we go to Tian's house and we find out Jem is there. And so Jem explains a few things to Magnus, one of which is that the Elder's curses are the eldest surviving children of the greater demons. And there can only be 9 at a time. And so Shinyun was also after Tessa, because Tessa is the eldest cursed of Belal, I want to say. And then we meet the rest of the Key family. And that's Jem's mother's family. And so we meet one of them is Li Kin, or Laura. And she's from Melbourne. We meet our first Australian shadow hunter. And I was like, yay! Hi, darling. It's good to see you. And I think she's either a fangirl or has a crush on Clary. I'm not sure which. And we meet this woman called Mother Yun, who is a truly formidable old lady, like, think McGonagall. And we get backstory on Shanghai and demons. So there was this demon called Yan Lo, who was in control of the Diyu, who was killed in revenge for what happened to Jem by the Key family and Elias Carstairs. And so the Diyu has not been opened since. And Ba Jingjing was trapped in the Diyu, and so now Samuel is in control of it. And that might have been what Ragnar helped him with. And so Magnus has an X cut on his chest now and marks of chains on his arms, and I'm like, Clary's vision. Alec checks on Max, and apparently he's literally climbing the walls. And there's a story that he loves that sounds absolutely horrifying, and I hope my kids never find it. It's called The Very Small Mouse Who Went a Very Long Way. And here is a quote from it. The finest mouse will go neglected, who is not often disinfected. Nope. I'm good. I will teach my kids the hungry caterpillar. And the rainbow fish. Magnus talks to Ragnar in a dream. And turns out Tian is dating a Fey girl, Jin Feng, which obviously with the cold piece is not allowed, so they have to be careful. And then something weird happened in the alley. Magnus was hearing voices and it looked like it was out of hell. And we meet up with Peng Fang, who, if you remember from the first Elder's Curses book, The Red Scrolls of Magic, he wasn't very helpful. But in this time, he's much friendly and much more forthcoming, and literally has a cardboard cutout of Alec in his stall advertising, because Alec is the head of the Downwelder Shadowhunter Alliance, and I'm like, okay. And then he reveals that Samuel is behind the mortal mishaps, because he's like the ruler of realms, that sort of thing. And blood magic may also come into play, thanks to the Lost Book of the White. And then we go to a seriously cool bookstore that I want to go to that's run by the Fae, and it has these awesome like dragon statues out front that if you try and steal a book, they will stop you. And it's good. So it turns out the thorn dagger thing is made of black adamantus. Adamas, I don't know how to pronounce that metal. You know, it's the weapons that Shadowhunters make, but this has been corrupted. And then, apparently, the one with chains must arm himself. So we go to see these Fey smiths, and Magnus and Alec both get special blades. Magnus gets the white blade called Mercy, and Alec the black blade called Judgment. I'm like, ooh. The couple that slays together stays together. But then I'm also like, I don't recall ever seeing these swords again. And Alec has a vision of a bad Magnus, like a Magnus with the thorns fully controlling him. And apparently it was the sword's test that he was a worthy wielder. And he passed. And then Ragnar and Shinyun open up a portal and attack the market, and the gang has to go through to close it. And when they get there, they're in the DU, and Simon is missing. And I'm like, no, Simon. But then the first demon we come across, it's our good old buddy Elias. And I'm like, good to see ya! Like, for a demon, you're funny. Like, you're still a demon, but to be honest, you're not half bad. Like, you're probably still gonna get up to shenanigans, but you're at least funny. You don't seem evil. And then Tian is randomly here. Tian is there. And I'm like, why are you here? This is so random. Why? We didn't bring you through the portal. How are you here? And Magnus is getting angry. And then Izzy gets taken because this is like purgatory, and so they demand a soul to do their tortures, so they take Izzy. And then we meet Horseface and Oxhead demons. They had Chinese names, but... And then Ragnar and Shinyun are fighting each other, and I'm like, because they disagree with, like, the methods, like, because Ragnar allowed the gang to come through, and Shinyun's like, this was a mistake, we should send them back, and Ragnar's like, nah, they're here, let's just keep them here, and something like that. And then Samuel is here, and I'm like, great, that's what we need. And then Tian turns out to be a betrayer, and I'm like, I knew it, you were along for no reason. And then Magnus gives the best speech, and I'm sorry, but I have to read you. It is the best speech. And part of my language in this, because there is a swear word. It's page 238 for those people who have the book. And I've already read it, so I'm not spoiling it. Okay, speech is... Alec didn't know what to say. He didn't have to speak, though, as Magnus said loudly. That is bullshit, Ki-Yi-Tan. Tian looked taken aback. Even Samuel looked a little taken aback. Magnus's magic flared, red, roiling, and furious, shining from his chest and from his hands. He didn't cast any spell, though. Just advanced on Tian, a chemical fire raging in his gold-green eyes. You are not just some mundane, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. You are a shadow hunter. You have a duty, a responsibility. You have a high and holy purpose. Do you understand me? He paused, like he was waiting for an answer. Tian opened his mouth after a moment, and Magnus immediately spoke again. You are the protector, he said, of our world, ordained by the angel, instilled with his fire, given the gifts of heaven. He grabbed Tian's arm and glared into his eyes. I know shadow hunters, Tian. I've known them for centuries. I've seen them at their best and at their worst. But I've known others too. Downworlders, mundanes, and if there's one thing that shadow hunters must understand, it is that they are not like other people. They love, they build, they covet wealth, when there is time. When the duty, the solemn duty, the only duty, the barrier dividing the living creatures of earth from oblivion and the hands of literal, actual, pure evil, Samuel waved jauntily, allows them to. All love is important. Your love is important. And for some people, their love can be the single most important thing, more important than even the whole world. But not for shadow hunters, because keeping the whole world safe is not everyone's reason for being, but is absolutely yours. The flare of magic faded. Magnus lowered his head. Yeah, agreed Clary faintly from behind Alec. Alec, however, was staring at Magnus. I didn't know you felt that way, he said. To his own ears, he sounded stupefied. I assumed you thought the whole holy warrior business was just silliness. Even I think it's just silliness sometimes, offered Jace. And I've literally had evil burned out of my body with heavenly fire. Magnus's expression softened. He stepped back towards Alec, as though he'd only just realized how far he'd advanced towards Tian and Samuel. I try not to take things too seriously, he said to Alec. You know that. The world is an absurd place, he said to Alec. You know that. The world is an absurd place, and to take it too seriously would be to let it win. And I still stand by that philosophy, most of the time. But most of the time, he added, I'm not standing in front of an actual father of demons in actual hell. It's just like, that damn, Magnus is spitting bars! Yeah. And then they leave, Xian leaves, like all the bad guys leave, and then the rest jump off the bridge. Because there's a horde of incoming demons. And they land after like falling for like 10 minutes. And Magnus has a messed up dream. Raphael becoming more demon-like, it's a whole thing. And then it turns out Samuel has kidnapped Simon. And as soon as I realized he had done it, I was like, he's pissed that he killed Lilith. Because remember I said Samuel is the lover of Lilith. I was right. And turns out Xinyun is unimpressed with his work ethic. Because he's taking time out of the great plan to torture Simon. She's like, really, we have bigger priorities. So she takes the others to try and rescue Simon so he can get back on track. And then it turns out Tian isn't a traitor because he turns up, saves, and attacks Xinyun. And then Izzy comes in like a bamf on the back of a freaking tiger, which turns out to be a fae, that Tian had summoned. And it turns out he spent the entire time they were falling and whatnot, he was getting Izzy. And then they managed to escape with Simon. And they go to the replica church, because apparently there's an entire replica of Shanghai in this Diu. And so they go to the replica church, and there's still weapons there, because it's a replica of the church. And they resupply weapons. And Simon suffers a bit of a crisis, and he talks about George, and that's on page 283. I'm sorry, but it's George. I've got to talk about this. 283, 283, 283. Simon glowered. In May, he said, his voice shaking, I watched George Lovelace die screaming for no reason. He drank from the mortal cup, and he burned, and he died. He was no different than me, no less worthy of ascension. If anything, he was more worthy than me. No one spoke. It was the final lesson of the academy, he said quietly. Shadowhunters die. They just die. For no reason. It's a dangerous job, said Jace. George wasn't doing anything dangerous, Simon grounded out. He didn't die in a noble act of sacrifice. He didn't die because the demon got the better of him. He died because sometimes Shadowhunters die, and it isn't for anything. It just is. That was the lesson. Isabel was rescued, said Alec. You're rescued. Tiana's okay. This time, Simon laughed. Yes, this time it worked out. What about next time? And by the way, next time, it's tomorrow. How do you do it? He looked around at them hopelessly. How do you risk yourselves and everyone you love over and over again? And Izzy manages to, talk him down, and he thinks, and he doesn't regret being a shadow hunter, but he just needed to have that breakdown because George did. He died for nothing. And I'm still pissed at the Mortal Cup for that. It turns out Tian was being blackmailed because, the freaking cohort is there, and while the conclave, for the most part, and his family are perfectly okay with him dating a fae, the cohort wouldn't be, and they would make sure the clave would punish them, and his family would lose power at the Institute. And then it turns out the swords are gods, and I got really confused. And so apparently Alec is wielding Fan Wuzhu, which means there is no salvation for evildoers, and Magnus wields Zibian. Be at peace, all those who atone. Yeah, I completely butchered those. I sincerely apologize. Okay, so the swords of gods, don't quite get it, but okay. And then so Alec is really worried about Magnus because Magnus wants to use himself as bait. So he gets Magnus to agree to join the Alliance Rune, both of them, and I'm like, yay! The Alliance Rune is like their rune. Come on. And so Magnus sneaks away and he manages to use the swords to save Ragnar, but then they disappear. And we see so much more of their friendship. Like throughout this book, we saw their first meeting in the Silent City when Magnus was being raised by the Silent Brothers and Ragnar came in to train him. We see when Magnus saved Katrina. We just see so much of their friendship and it's so beautiful. And then like a minute later when they're walking back to the group, it turns out we need the swords. And I'm like, fantastic, they're gone. And then so it turns out it's because Samuel and Shinyun are there, and Alec is like, oh, use them to free Ragnar. That's great. I just wish you had told me. And then the others get trapped in this pit of lava thing. It's like an extreme endurance test. And Malik and Ragnar get taken to Samuel's place. I don't know. And so Ragnar makes the decision to let himself get punished by Samuel because he apparently did a lot of terrible things when he was under Samuel's control, and he can't forgive himself even though he was under control when it happened because he let Samuel, take control of him because he didn't want to die. And I'm like, look, mate, it's extenuating circumstances, and if you want to self-immolate, maybe not when we're trying to fight the bad guys off. You can do it once we get out, okay? To priorities, timing. So Shinyun and Magnus and Alec are fighting, and Shinyun goes to stab Magnus for the third time because Magnus is really refusing, but Alec gets in the way and gets stabbed instead, and everyone expects Alec to die because the only people who can survive getting stabbed by this blade are warlocks. But Alec manages to use the magic of the Alliance Rune to get the thorn magic out of Magnus. And I'm just like, sweet. And then Shunyun absorbs the magic out of Magnus to become a greater demon. Like, not a prince of hell, but a greater demon. And she flies away and starts to destroy the DU, and Samuel is just like, I'm gonna exit stage left. This plan is not working. So he leaves as well, and I'm like, great, Shinyun's a greater demon. I'm sure that isn't going to bite us in the butt. And so then it's time to leave. The others are fine. It was just like some extreme dodging thing, and they worked out the trick. It was fine. Jace broke an ankle, though. And so they leave, and they get home safely, which is awesome. And when they first get home, Magnus is feeling guilty because he was turning dark and that sort of thing, and he's worried he's going to put Max and Alec in more danger, so he's trying to withdraw from Max. But Kat is there, and she's just like, no, you don't get to do this, no. And she talks some sense into him, and yeah. And there's a really sweet moment towards the end where Max calls Magnus Pak, it's Indonesian, for father. And it's just, it's really sweet. And Magnus makes the excellent call to move the Lost Book of the White to the Spiral Labyrinth. He's just like, I don't want to keep this in our house anymore. You take it to the Spiral Labyrinth. And then we get the epilogue, and the princes of hell have all gathered, and Samuel is like, we need to team up. Okay? And I mean all of us. And so the others are like, wait, you mean Lucifer? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, great, we're bringing Lucifer into the next one? Freaking Lucifer! This is good. Because I've worked out the timeline of when the books get released. If I'm correct on this, we're gonna have Chain of Iron. That's the next one. And so then the one after that should be the third book in the Elder's Curses. And I don't have the reassurance like I did with this one, because I think the third one's going to be set after the events of Queen of Air and Darkness and Ghosts of the Shadow Market, that everyone's going to be okay, because, you know, it'll be the most recent one in the timeline, that book. So I'm like, if freaking Lucifer is there, we could actually lose someone. Someone could die. Because it's freaking Lucifer. I'm not okay with this. I was fine when we were dealing with the others. Him? No. And then we have the very sweet epilogue with Jem and Tessa's dream wedding, literally. And even Mark and Will show up. So, like, it's literally a dream. Magnus uses the last of the thorn magic that was still in him to allow Tessa and Jem to get married while they're in a dream, because, you know, they're on the run from everyone to do with the first heir at the time. So they can't afford to get everyone together because everyone might get in trouble or in danger. And it's really sweet, and Will turns up as well, and it's just so cute, but it makes me wonder if that comic is still canon. The one that I showed you guys in the City of Heavenly Vibe video, well, I gave you the link. So I'm like, is that still canon or not? Because, like, certain things that happened in it were still true, but other things I don't know if they were. But everyone was there, which was nice, and apparently the only people who are going to remember the dream wedding will be Malik and Jessa. Anyway, so that was The Lost Book for the White by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. It was very good, very, very good, but it does suffer from being a book where you're trying to convince us where the characters are in danger when it's literally impossible that they are, because we see them later on. Next Elder's Curse book will not have that problem, and I will be petrified. But there's a lot of cute couple moments in it, so. And little Maxie, I want a book just about Max and Raphael. I also want a book just about Helen and Elaine, but we'll see. Because obviously they weren't in this one except for the brief mention in the Dream Wedding because they're stuck on Wrangel Island, which disappointed me. I really enjoyed them teaming up with Malik in the last one. Maybe they'll team up with him in the third one. Yes. Okay, and this is an addendum onto my Lost Book of the White Book talk, because I realised another reason why that book felt so flat for me, and why I still enjoyed it, and I still think it's a great book. It's just, I enjoyed the Red Skulls and Magic so much better, and I've worked out the reason why, because they both technically have the fault where I know the characters are going to be okay at the end, because I've seen them in later books. And that was because we had other characters in it who we hadn't met before, like, not truly, and we got to know them quite well in the book. And those characters were the characters of, let me flip to the page, Elaine and Helen. Elaine and Helen. We got to see them get together, and they were helping out Alec. I mean, true, that was just the tail end of the book, but I was living for it. I loved them so much as a couple. When they came and they were around a lot in Queen of Air and Darkness, I was so happy. I was so happy. Okay, I love them so much. And so getting them and seeing their meet cute and everything, I was just like, yes. But obviously in the Lost Book of the White, they're stuck on Wrangel Island, so they're not there. And we get the rest of the regular gang, and I'm like, look, I love you guys. I do. It's just, I wanted to hear from other characters. Like, we heard from this very fascinating character called Tian, and Tian? I butcher that pronunciation. And I loved hearing it, and hearing about the Key family, I loved hearing about that. I like the fact that the Lost Book of the White is bringing in characters we haven't met before, or we don't truly know well. It's a refreshing change. So that's why it felt a little flat for me, because I was just like, I want my girls back. I want Helen and Elaine back being badasses. I want them back. Yeah. Okay, that's it for the addendum. Anyway, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, like, leave a comment, maybe even subscribe, and I'll see you next time.